Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started. Welcome, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, to our episode of Positive Recovery MD. My name is Julie DeNofa, and I am your host. And today we have Stephen Odell with us. Thanks, Stephen, for being with us. Just a little bit of information about Stephen is that he has been with Stages of Recovery for 12 years. He served in many roles there as the company has continued to grow. I imagine that he's a big part of their growth now. He's currently one of the owners and the CFO. So we talk about growth in many different ways. Also does direct business development and admissions for those in need of services. His time with Stages began when he was a client learning how to live his life new in recovery. He began his journey at the young age of 18 with big dreams and goals. You still look 18, so you'll have to tell me how many years of sobriety do you have, but we'll get into that with your story. Stages of Recovery has provided him with the tools, guidance, and community needed to build a life worth living. He later achieved his bachelor's and master's degree in personal financial planning in 16 and 17 from Texas Tech University with the help of a scholarship for the Center for Collegiate Recovery Communities, the CRC. I really want to give a shout out to any collegiate program that's out there for folks in recovery, because that is just such a great way to help stabilize during a time when it can be very difficult for people in recovery. For our listeners, most major universities have collegiate recovery programs and definitely are worth checking into. He went on to get his CFP, which is a certified financial planner, in 2018. And Stephen's unique personal as well as his extensive professional experience are what makes him a great fit to help you and your family, or our listeners, navigate through the complicated process of helping find help for your loved one that's in need. And so I'd love to dive into that a little bit about how you help others find services. Many people think of wealth as a monetary value. Stephen defines wealth as the relentless pursuit of a desired lifestyle and the strategic maintenance of that lifestyle. So that's his quote. So we don't even have to ask him what his favorite quote is, because that could be it. With the help of Stages, what Stephen says is that you and your family can help begin to define what your goals are and begin the process of healing together. So you're doing so much for the recovery community. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And that was awesome. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better, obviously. And being able to come on this show is just a blessing. I love trying to get the word out in any way that's possible to try to help encourage those professionals and those that might be listening who are in recovery, a family member that might be listening. I'm just so appreciative that you guys have this and that you guys are pushing this message out, because the more that we do this, the more barriers we're going to break to the treatment process. And so I just want to say thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely. So how many years are you in recovery?
This October would be 12 and a half years.
Woo! Okay, yeah. I was way off. You're a little older than 18 these days.
Yes, these days for sure. It feels like it was yesterday though, but yes, I did. I got sober at a really young age, which is kind of interesting. You know, I think it's great that a lot of people are getting sober at a young age, but on the flip side of that, that means that a lot of our youth is struggling, right? And so a better thing would be that our youth doesn't have to enter recovery, right? That'd be the more, I'm glad that we are having young people get sober, but that means that young people are needing to get sober, right? That's kind of sad as well. So, but anyways, yeah, I was real young. I didn't have a very long using or drinking career, as you can imagine, but it was very short and destructive. And so that kind of led me to the point where I needed some help.
Great. And how did you go about getting help at that time?
Well, the state of Texas helps out quite a bit when you're running around getting in trouble. And I think, I'm from a small town called Bandera. I don't know if you or anybody knows where that is, but it's a small town right outside of San Antonio. And it's a small school. I think it was like a 1A school, maybe a 2A school when I was there. So it's small. Everybody knows each other. You're either friends with a person or you don't like a person, right? There's just like a coin flip there. And so you end up in a certain group of people, depending on the choices that you make, right? And at the time, I was making some pretty poor choices, which led me to be around other individuals that were also willing to make poor choices. Because if we all make poor choices, they're not poor choices.
And the parents, if your parents don't know who to blame if you're all making bad choices together.
Yeah, right. Well, some of the parents were engaging in these bad choices with us, right?
Okay.
And so this was a normal part of life. Drinking at a very young age. I remember it must have been the summer that I was turning 11 years old. I was 10 or 11 years old, and we snuck some beers out of our parents' garage refrigerator, right? That kind of thing. Acted like we liked them. We didn't. They were terrible, right? But at that point, we were cool. We had a secret. We were connected with this thing, right, as a group of friends. And that clearly at that age, you're not an alcoholic or some sort of substance abuse issue isn't happening at the time. But there certainly is something happening internally at that point in time. A lot of it has to do with insecurities. A lot of it has to do with the lack of connection or the lack of authentic connection that you might be receiving. And so you find it in other avenues. And that's what I was doing. I was seeking out, those types of relationships to feel connected, where I wasn't feeling connected in other avenues. And once again, the choices we were making, as long as we all made them, they were good, right? Because he's co-signing this decision with me. And even if we get in trouble, we're going to get in trouble together, right? And so
you guys were willing to follow one bad decision with another bad decision.
That's right. Yes. And then you got to lie to cover that up. And here we go in this cycle of lying. And growing up in the type of household that I did, obviously lying, I felt a lot of shame and guilt about it. I buried that deep, right? Because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I was doing it anyways. And so there's all this shame and guilt and it's kind of crazy thinking about that at 13 or 14, but that's true. It's the truth. That's what's happening. That's what a lot of our young kids are going through at 13, 14. They feel shame. They feel guilt. It's not all fun and games, even though they're teenagers. It's a lot to handle, especially because as society continues to progress, so does access to information and access to anything really, right? Whether it's good or bad. There's a lot of things that are progressing amazingly. And we have access to a lot of positive resources and as well as a lot of negative ones too. So it's pretty interesting seeing that. But yeah, I remember maybe 15 or 16 years old. It wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't to have fun anymore. It was to get drunk. It was to get high. And it was to the point where I was doing it without friends, right? Or making sure that I used by myself before engaging with them, so that I could be as high as possible before having to share, right?
So that how it all started, you talked about like it was a way to connect. And now as it's progressing into something else, you actually had to get so high in order to be around them. So you felt disconnected. So like talk about that.
The connection was now the substance.
Yep.
Right. So the friendship didn't matter anymore. My relationship to this feeling was now more important. Mm-hmm. Right. So at first I'm needing to feel connection by these other individuals and I'm willing to do almost anything to get it. And that goes for anybody. You have people that are 50, 60 years old that absolutely know better, right? But they make unhealthy decisions in order to try to feel connection because human beings need to feel loved, period. Right. And we will do anything to feel that. That's why we enter unhealthy relationships. That's why we continue unhealthy jobs. That's why we do the things that we do. It all boils down to that connection that we need as human beings on such a deep level. And I was running away from my relationship with Christ. And for me, I don't know why this is, but it's almost impossible for me, and maybe I was made this way, whatever. It's almost impossible for me to stay stagnant. If I'm not running to Christ, I'm running to sin. I don't understand. There's no chill for me. There has never been any chill for me. I'm either doing one or the other. And every time that I've disconnected from my faith, I have fallen to sin. And it's just a repeated pattern that I was so sick of. I mean, 17 years old, and I'm thinking, this can't be it. Like, this cannot be what I was set out to. This can't be what I was made to be. Everybody around me is going to jail or the military because the opportunities in a small town like Bandera are pretty limited financially, right? Things of that nature. And so I remember thinking to myself, I'm just going to be as bad as I can be. That's what I'm going to do. I don't care anymore. The world made me this way. I come from a family of little means, and that's not my fault. That's their fault. I'll blame them for that. And just anything that I could do to justify the unhealthy decisions I was making, I was going to do that. And no matter how many times I got caught by the police, I wouldn't stop. I was 18 years old, so I had a bunch of minor charges that disappeared when I turned 18. Right? Like minor in consumption, minor in possession, minor in this, and oh my gosh, all this stuff. When I turned 18, the game changed a little bit. It's a little bit more serious now. And so I started going to jail for DWIs, serious assault charges, right? Getting caught with large amounts of marijuana. And so the consequences started piling up pretty quickly, and still there was nothing that was going to stop me. That's kind of what was going on as a young man, right? I have these connection issues. I have these insecurities. I'm feeling a ton of shame and guilt because I know exactly what I'm doing is wrong. I wasn't raised that way. I was doing it anyways, and I didn't know why, and just layer on layer on layer. So where I would wake up in the morning immediately overwhelmed with negative feelings, and I needed to change the way that I felt. And that's that pattern that we fall victim to. Over and over and over. And so that's kind of what was going on as a young man.
When and how did that change for you? I know you said the great state of Texas kind of intervened.
Yeah,
so
a little
what
bit.
What did it look like after that?
Yeah, I had a lot of consequences that were stacking up, but that still wasn't really what did it, although it was certainly in the back of my mind. I ended up getting into a terrible car accident. And I woke up in the hospital, and I remember the first thing I thought of was so selfish. I was grateful that I didn't hurt. My first thing was that I didn't hurt anybody, so I wouldn't go to jail. And I immediately minimized what had just happened. Well, I didn't hurt anybody, so I won't go to jail. And they were just looking at me like, holy shit, dude.
Yeah, you're waking up in the hospital bed.
Like, dude, you hurt everybody around you. Everybody around you is hurt, right? Like, thank God there wasn't somebody in the car with me, right? But that's where my mind was, right? For the first time, my family, my parents, they, when your parents get mad, they get exaggerated. They'll yell or they'll be very emotional, right? And when they're very scared, parents get scared, and their flaws start to come out sometimes too, because they're also humans, right? But this was the first time my parents were so calm, so collected. They were like, bye, see you later. We just wanted to see you wake up. We're glad you woke up. We'll see you later. And I just got these chills remembering. They've never talked to me like that. They've never done that. They're usually upset. And if they're upset, I can calm them down. Right. But there was no, they were just like, see you later, buddy. We're glad you woke up. Have a good time. I was at some hospital in San Antonio, because when you hurt yourself in a small town, there's not a hospital anywhere, right? Like, it's a 50-minute ambulance ride to a hospital that can take care of you. So you got to be real careful out in the country. And so luckily, no one else was in the car. And I didn't know this at the time, but I'll talk about that here in a second. So I thought this was a very minimal accident. The only thing that got damaged was the car. I'm fine, right? Everything's fine. Everybody calm down. This is okay. So I wake up, I'm handcuffed to a hospital bed. The police officer comes in and makes me sign proof that I was the driver so that they could give me a citation of a DWI. And so he went away. I went to sleep again, and then I woke up and my parents had left. They left me there, which was terrifying to me. I was for the first time, I was pretty alone in that hospital bed. That was a pretty lonely feeling in that hospital bed. And then my grandpa comes in and says, hey, man, bless his heart. He's got to be 70 something at the time. He's 92 now. So he was like, hey, man, where you want to go? They're discharging you because nothing was physically wrong with me to keep me in the hospital. And so I remember this place called Starlight. Huge shout out to them. The reason I knew about Starlight was because my uncles had been there. My father had been there. And this thing runs deep in the Odell family. And I remembered a place that you could go, to get some help, whatever. And they made some phone calls. They connected me there. And then my grandpa and my mom dropped me off at Starlight, and I signed myself in, and I was there for 28 days. Long-term treatment wasn't as popular 12 and a half years ago. It was just a lot of, short-term places. Nowadays you can stay at places longer, which is really amazing. But 2 weeks into my treatment stay, my mother came to visit me. They didn't give you snacks either at the time. You had to buy them from a vending machine. So they wouldn't give you they had apples and stuff, but no one's trying to eat an apple. If you wanted some sugar or a Snickers, you had to get it from a vending machine.
Yes.
I think treatment centers nowadays just pass that stuff out. But back in the day, it was a big deal. So I needed some quarters. I remember begging my mom to bring me a roll of quarters so I can get some vending machine snacks and trade those snacks for cigarettes and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what was going on at Starlight 12 years ago. Anyways, I needed some clothes. So she brings me this little bag of clothes with some athletic shorts and white t-shirts kind of thing, and gave me a roll of quarters. And I was like, thank you so much. And then we sat down on this bench, and I tell this story a lot. This bench is still there. Starlight still has this bench out front. And every time I go to do an alumni speaker or something like that at Starlight, some kind of event they have, I always sit at this bench and say a prayer. Because on this bench is where I started to feel real consequences, life-changing consequences. Because the trouble I was in wasn't doing it. That wreck wasn't really a big deal. I minimized that. But for the first time ever, I sat down with my mom and my little brother on this bench. He must have been 15 at the time. She told me what happened, that I had actually had way worse of a wreck than I thought, that I had flatlined multiple times, twice on the way to the hospital. The paramedics in the ambulance thought that there was no way I was going to survive even to get to the hospital. I got there barely breathing, continued to flatline there. The doctors are coming out telling my mom to prepare herself, because that's how they say that, right? And so my mom is having to have these conversations with doctors well, what does that mean? They're like, well, if anybody wants to see him, they may want to come up here to the hospital, which is why my 70-year-old grandparents were there, right? Yeah. They thought I was going to die. And so they wanted to see me breathing before that happened. And so my mom's telling me all this. I'm just bawling. I'm just crying, dude, because she's crying, right? So now my little brother starts crying, right? And I've always been a protector of him, or tried to be a protector of him. And so anyways, it's this super emotional moment on this bench. And it was the first time that she held the mirror up to show me who I really was and what was really going on. And I couldn't run away. Because back in the day, if she tried to have a serious conversation with me, I'd rationalize, minimize, or run away. Right. Be quiet. That's not true. That's not what's really happening. Just calm her down. Let's just calm her down. Right. But I had no control at this point. It was one of my weakest moments. Right. Thank goodness. And so she's explained to me what happened. And from that day forward, I don't know what it was, but because I thought very little of myself. Right. It wasn't a big deal that I almost died, but it was a big deal that my mother almost lost a child. Mm-hmm. Right. So this thing switched, and I had to see that I was impacting other people. Right. My little brother almost lost his older brother. You see, so this is way more intimate now. OK, I sat from that day forward. I sat at the front of the class. I had my big book in hand. I was paying attention in therapy. I just dove in the last 2 weeks of treatment. Stopped hanging around the people that were selling the cigarette thing, because that was you get in trouble and this and that, right? So I stopped all that. I started trying to be a respectable young man, as much as a respectable 18-year-old could be, I guess. Right. So because I also didn't have a lot of life under me, right? So there was also this whole thing of ignorance, because I didn't know a lot of things. I'm 31. I feel like I know a little bit more, but didn't know a whole lot at 18.
I think that sometimes that's where the beauty happens, is when we become aware enough to know that we don't know, and that we have a willingness and we're open for taking suggestions that people who may know just a little bit more about what's going on, and we just start taking suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. I started listening, and my counselor, huge shout out to Mr. Brian Sanford. He's the executive director of the Arbor. Yeah. He was my counselor at Starlight. And so he was the one that was working with me on my therapy. And he suggested that I go to an aftercare program. It's like, all right. I was like, cool. Don't even have to ask me again, whatever. Where do I go? He was like, well, I don't know. He goes, what's your budget? I was like, zero. Zero. Don't have one, buddy. He was like, all right, I'll see what I can do. So he's calling around to these places, probably all over. And he calls a place that's called Stages of Recovery. And I think a man at the time, a man named Cole Watts, who's now one of my best friends and business partners, answered the phone and allowed me to go there with pretty much absolutely nothing. Allowed me to go there to Stages in Lubbock, Texas, where it started about 14 years ago. And that's when I began my aftercare journey. And so I was this really young, impressionable young man trying to do right, trying to dive back into my faith, going to my AA meetings, doing my PHP groups and IOP groups. And, I'm trying to be this guy, this guy in early recovery that can take suggestions and try to manage my anger and my anxiety and then just do what I'm asked to do on a daily basis, make my bed, right? Get a job. I think my first job in Lubbock was at Rosa's Cafe. It was I was washing dishes for $6.25 an hour. You know what's funny is Cole Watts just sent me a photo. He went and ate there yesterday, and they have a now hiring sign at that same location in Lubbock, and they're offering $11 an hour starting out. And I thought, man, that's almost doubled. Right?
Yeah,
that made me feel pretty old yesterday.
Well, at least you're not looking for a side hustle.
Goodness gracious, yeah, I don't eat there on Taco Tuesdays anymore because I remember being the kid in the back having to wash dishes on a Taco Tuesday, and it's the worst ever. It's just the worst. And I'll never go do that because I know there's some young kid back there having the worst day of his life. I don't want to add to his pain. So I don't go to Taco Tuesdays at Rosa's for that reason.
Definitely off the table. All right.
No, I don't want to do it. Some guy named, John is back there just dying. You know what I mean? Oh gosh. But that's where I was at, right? I ended up working overnights at IHOP. I found a job that was a little closer than that because it was an hour and a half walk one way to get to Rosa's. Okay. So I didn't have a car. So I'm having to walk like an hour and a half to work for 8 to 10 hours in a dish pit and then walk an hour and a half home. And that got pretty tiring after about 6 months. I couldn't do that anymore. And so I started applying at other jobs. I found an overnight shift job at IHOP. Okay. But it was only a 20-minute walk. So that was a big deal for me. Right? Yeah. So I worked there for about 18 months and it was at this point. So I must have had, I had a couple years. I had about 2 years sober. I'm feeling good. I'm still at the sober living. I was a long-term sober living client. Okay. I had a lot of building up to do. I ended up getting probation for all that stuff we talked about earlier. I got years of that, fines, you name it. They did everything except put me in jail, which I was grateful for. I was like, I'll do all that stuff. I just don't want to see the inside of a jail cell. They're like, all right, you can go back to Lubbock. So I'm doing that, all my probation stuff, working. And the whole reason that Brian sent me to Lubbock was because he had gotten his degree in counseling from the Texas Tech CRC program. And he was like, this is a perfect opportunity for you to go up there, accomplish some of these short-term goals like your probation and getting stable financially. Just get to a point where you can pay your rent and pay those guys back because they let me in there for free, basically. So I had to pay them back, right? Just go up there and get stable, right? And then potentially pursue school. I was like, okay, cool. So I eventually got into South Plains College. I remember I saved up enough money to get a laptop, which was the coolest thing ever. And so I could sign up for online classes at this point. And I was feeling really good about life. My girlfriend at the time, we were doing okay, right? And I had this little life that I was happy with, even though I was working overnights at IHOP and I had to walk home in the middle of the night. I walked home with a smile on my face, right? I woke up at 2:00 in the afternoon to go to the 3 p.m. swing shift, surprisingly with a smile on my face, right? And so these things that I thought were not important, happiness, right? Being calm, feeling peace, right? Were starting to come into my life, although I had nothing else, right? It was at that point I realized that nothing else mattered, right? I started to be able to go home again for Thanksgiving, right? I started connecting with my family again. And all those things that I truly wanted were pointless. And I started to accumulate all the things that mattered the most to me. And I started, more importantly, to realize what those were. Right. So again, this shift in my mind was happening. And that's the relentless work in the 12 steps, relentless work in my big book, relentless work trying to connect with God. I mean, daily, I was doing things daily to try to get those connections back. And it worked. And then I was going to move out. I was going to move out of Stages, and a house manager position opened up. And that's when I petitioned myself for it. Steve Medley, the founder of Stages, said no. And I was like, okay, cool. That's cool. Right. It's all right. And then I did a little more petitioning for myself. I think he tried to hire or maybe talk to a couple more people and it didn't work out. And I said, hey man, I'm still here, and he reluctantly hired me to be a house manager. And I think he, years later, I asked him why, right? First off, why'd you say no the first time? And then why'd you end up hiring me? And he was worried because of how young I was, that I wasn't going to be able to command a apartment complex filled with 30 something guys. He was worried that I wasn't going to be able to command authority. I think I was 19. I think I was 19 or 20. No, I must have been, I was 20, almost 21, I think. Okay. But he hired me and it worked out great. I brought a different perspective to Stages because Steve and Cole had never been a client in their own system. Right. And so I brought this different perspective and I made some change that seriously impacted the company. I like to think so.
Tell me a little bit about that change.
It was things like what the staff didn't know the clients were talking about, right? The complaints that you have behind closed doors, I was on the other side of those doors.
Right.
Like how much they hated the fact that the house meeting was on a weekend. I moved it to Tuesdays. Everybody started showing up and having their meeting sheets. Right. So like these little things that the staff thought was convenient, I started kind of petitioning for some change. Right. And I started telling them how people were cheating drug tests. Right. I started telling them how this. So I started kind of revamping some of their procedures, if you will, some of the layout. And then one thing that I thought I was really good at was I was capable of helping individuals understand their finances because I came from nothing, right? And I had to get on my finances really, really quickly. And so that was a big problem in sober living is how do you get these guys jobs? How can you help them maintain their payments and also not go start destroying their life in other areas financially? Because some people get sober and then start spending money like crazy. I mean, it was like, right. I was really good at sitting somebody down and creating them these little financial plans, right? And so I started helping people in that way. I mean, I think Steve really liked that because 6 months later, he asked me to be one of his business partners. That was pretty shocking because once again, I must have been 21. I think I had just turned 21 and I signed on as one of the owners of Stages in January of 2012. And so that's what I started doing. I was one of the owners now. It was way more serious. I was really nervous about that. And for the last 10 years or longer, really, I was just going to school at Texas Tech University and helping grow Stages. And that's kind of what my life transitioned from. Early on in recovery. You have to take in a good way, right? You have to get your cup full, right? I'm ignorant. I'm young. I'm naive. I don't have a lot of experience under my belt and I needed anything anybody could give me. And I was like a sponge. You know what I mean? I hung around the right people, right? If someone wasn't taking things seriously, I would request that they were removed from my apartment. I'd be like, hey, I don't want this dude in my house, dude. Like, this is not a good vibe for us. He's not a good vibe for the community. And Steve liked that a lot, that I was capable of voicing those things for his community. And so anyways, that's kind of why and how I ended up so involved with Stages. And then, I pursued a degree in financial planning from Texas Tech University. Red Raiders, go, baby. Get your guns up. It's one of the best personal financial planning programs in the country. They have a huge success rate for passing the CFP exam, which is the hardest financial exam in the United States. And so I wanted to pursue a field in wealth management, and that's what I did. I ended up finishing my bachelor's and my master's. I ended up getting my CFP, as you mentioned in the intro, and I opened up a small wealth management firm about 1.5 years ago, right before COVID hit. I opened up a small wealth management practice. And so that's kind of what I do now. I obviously still have a lot of duties related to stages of recovery. I have this new business and this new adventure that I'm embarking on. I just moved to the Houston area because my wife took a job at UT Physicians downtown. It's been pretty wild the last few years since I met my wife, and being open to that adventure, because I'm like a hermit crab. I was in Lubbock for 10 years. I built this nice little life, right? And I'm comfortable. And then she came in the picture. And I've moved to Waco. We were in Fort Worth. We're down here now. And so I've just been on this adventure with my wife for the last few years. And it's been really, really exciting.
Congratulations. It's funny that you said I've just been on this adventure with my wife, because that was the word I was thinking as you were describing kind of what you've been up to and moving and stuff like that. And so what a beautiful story to have someone to share an adventure with, right? And all of the positivity that has been created from the choices that you began making on that bench that day with your mom and your younger brother. Mm-hmm. So, because that seems to be your pivotal point, and it's kind of cool that you get to go back to that bench sometimes.
It's amazing. I start tearing up every time. It's so emotional when I go there. Because that is one of the most, I'll never forget that. That is one of the most pivotal moments of my life. And they continue to happen. I told this story last time. I was either on the La Hacienda alumni meeting or so. I can't remember I was talking about, I don't remember this. Okay. And I'll make this kind of brief. But so my little brother was used to me riding the bus home with him, right? Like we both leave school, we get on the same bus. And so one day I wasn't on the bus, and it was the first day that I wasn't on the bus with my little brother. And he was like, "Where's Stephen? That's weird. His name is Gabriel. My older brother's name is Michael." And so Gabriel is on the bus by himself. He's asking the other people, he's like, "Have y'all seen Stephen?" They're like, "No, we don't know where he's at." Turns out I decided to skip school that day with my friends. I think he gets home around 4:00, something like that. I come stumbling in shortly after. I have a 40 ounce of Mickey's in my hand. I'm 14, I'm like, he must have been 12, and I think I was 15, something like that. Okay, this was like 15 years ago. Okay, and he remembers this vividly. This was a big moment for my little brother to see his older brother stumbling and drunk. I have a 40 ounce of Mickey's in my hand, and he asked me, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. I really don't care anymore. I don't care to live anymore. I'm probably not going to make it to be 30, and I just really don't care anymore, Gabriel." And he told me, I do. I care about you and I love you. And he gave me a hug, and he said that I went and passed out. I don't know this happens. Okay. So 15 years later, I turned 30 years old last year. So these pivotal moments keep happening. Okay. Sure. My little brother calls me on my 30th birthday. I'm like, "Oh, he's calling me to say happy birthday." Cool. And he goes, "Hey man," he goes, "You're 30. I was like, "Yep, I sure am. I'm 30 years old." And he proceeds to tell me this story about how I didn't think that I'd make it to 30, and how I came in stumbling drunk and I didn't want to live anymore. Right. And that he told me that he loved me. And he said, "I've been waiting 15 years to call you to tell you that I knew you'd make it to 30 years old." And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember having that kind of impact on my little brother. Right. But we do. These moments in our lives can leave scars on others for forever. Right. I mean, he waited 15 years to tell me that I would make it to 30 and basically call me an idiot. Right.
Well, maybe he was getting a little of that needling in, but Gabriel sure sounds like very thoughtful and very loving, and had a lot of admiration for you, probably, when as a younger brother to you. So what did he wind up doing in life?
My little brother just finished his ministry. He's a reverend now. So
I knew he was going to, I felt like you were going to say that, or something of service, or some kind of, caretaking, or that type of role.
That's how it is in our family. I'm telling you, for some reason, if people in my family are not serving God, we are engulfing ourselves in sin. We've all given up. My dad's a pastor. My brother works at Warrior's Heart and helps veterans and first responders get help. I'm helping people every day. Gabriel is a minister. We need to do that. That's what we need to do. We've all accepted it, right?
Yes.
And so that's what we do in order to continue to do what God has created us to do. Because every time we try to do our own thing, it just falls apart so fast.
Well, I'm glad that you have that awareness and that you're doing your thing. That's for sure.
Fully aware.
If someone, one of our listeners and families that are listening, may have some questions about where do you go first? Because you talked a little bit at the beginning about prevention, right? Like if we could actually start with prevention, we wouldn't have so many people that were needing treatment. Mm-hmm. But for the family that needs treatment and kind of your involvement in the treatment community at this point, how would you recommend somebody go about getting treatment?
I mean, the first thing that people are going to do is try to talk to their closest loved ones. Okay, that's the first thing. People think that it's Google, and it's not. They're going to go talk to the one person they trust, whether that's a friend, a family member, their pastor, right? Their doctor. People, they go reach out to a person usually first. And so my recommendation is since we are that person to somebody, right? We need to educate ourselves in the mental health and substance abuse realm because we're going to get asked for help one day. And if you don't realize, sometimes they don't say, "Hi, I'm struggling with alcohol. Can you help me?" They don't say that. Mm-hmm. They come at you in this very subtle, shy, shameful way. And they start poking around what you do. "Hey, don't you want a sober living?" Da, da, da. I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, what's up?" Right. And I know immediately that this person is not asking me what I do for a living for no reason. Right. Yeah. I've been doing this a while. And so my encouragement is, as people who are a rock for someone else, we need to be more aware of the people around us and the way that they are and the way that they're asking for help. Because it's not going to be glaringly obvious every time. And then the way, obviously, if someone does reach out to you, the first thing you need to do is fill your tool belt with resources. So you might be a rock for somebody, but you might not have any resources. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you need to do your own research and find out what kind of mental health services are around me. What kind of psychiatrists are around me, right? Where is the local treatment center if there is one? And so that when that happens, not only are you now aware of this person's needs, you also have resources for them once you get to the bottom of what's going on. I think there's a lot more of that needs to happen within our families and within our friend circles. A lot more healing can happen if we educate ourselves more about what's going on.
For sure. And I know that you're helping families and individuals who suffer from substance use disorder heal every day. And I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your story with us and for our listeners. We're going to switch gears and run into the rapid fire question.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Mm-hmm. Resilience.
Awesome. What is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word. I've never been asked that question. I don't know if I have a least favorite word. I couldn't even think of I'm trying to think of something that people say that bothers me. You know what I mean? Like a pet peeve or something, But nothing's coming to mind.
Okay. Maybe it'll come to you before we finish today. And if it doesn't, maybe there just isn't one. Maybe, and that's okay too. Yeah. What is your most favorite sound?
Sound? Mm-hmm. A piano. Okay. I'm actually, I wear hearing aids. I don't know if you can tell, probably not. But so I have a lot of hearing loss. And so the piano sounds incredible to me. It's one of the sounds that I can hear very clearly. And so I really enjoy the sound of a piano. Any
particular type of sound coming from the piano, certain type of music, or can it just be any piano?
Almost any song that has a piano in it. I'm like, hold on a second. Yeah.
You pick that out.
Yeah.
Your least favorite sound?
My least favorite sound would probably be, we just moved here, and I would probably say my least favorite sound right now is the train that's close by.
Okay. You haven't got used to it yet. So it's not white noise yet. It's just
it's not
constantly
white noise
scares the daylights out of you.
Yeah. So right now it's the train.
Gotcha. If you could do any job at all, maybe as a young child, you thought like, this is what I want to be when I grow up, or just anything other than what you're doing now, what would it be?
Well, interesting question, because I am doing it. So in the 8th grade, I played a market watch game where they give you fake money and you get to trade on the real stock market. And since that day, I always wanted to be in the wealth management industry. And Brian Sanford, my therapist, was able to tap into that and encouraged me to make the decision to go to Lubbock because of that amazing program they had. And so I actually am doing that. I wanted to be a wealth advisor, and I wanted to help people with their money. when I was a young kid, and that's what I'm doing.
Fantastic. And that's fantastic that you're able to be doing what your dream was. Had you not gotten into recovery, then I don't know where you would be. But if you had a job that you if you had a job that you would absolutely despise doing, or that you're like, no way, that's not for me, what would that job be?
Being exposed to all of my hardworking staff and what they have to go through as therapists, I don't think I could do it. I don't think that I could be an individual therapist, like whatever therapy, LPC, LCSW, whatever. I don't think seeing what they go through and how they have to take care of themselves constantly. I just want to take care of every worker that has to do with mental health or substance abuse that is in the therapy realm. I just want to help them so much because I don't think I could, not that it's my least favorite, but I see what they go through and I just don't think I could do it. I think I'm tough, but I don't think I could do what they do. And so huge shout out to all those individuals out there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you wind up, your number's called, it's your time. You wind up at the pearly gates. What do you want God to say to you?
Good job.
Nice.
You did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did exactly what I made you to do. Good job.
I love that you came back around to, you did exactly what I made you to do, because early on in your story, you talked about how you knew you weren't living a life doing what you were intended to do. No. And here you are today.
That's why all those consequences come too, is I think sometimes consequences is God trying to speak to you, right? When you're doing something, yes. It's like the story when he broke the lamb's leg so the lamb would stop running away. People are like, wow, that's so vicious. But it was for a purpose, right? And so I think eventually you got to realize those consequences is God telling you to stop doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. We're going to go into the positive intervention we shared with Stephen prior to him joining us today on the podcast. And I'll open first with a quote by Albert Schweitzer. In the hopes of reaching the moon, men fail to see the flowers that blossom at their feet. The future holds many potential outcomes. Putting off happiness for a future time ends up wasting the present. Although you might certainly put your best foot forward today to increase the likelihood of a favorable tomorrow, right now is the only reality you can fully count on. Own and experience it. Learning to stay in and appreciate the present enables you to get the most out of each precious moment. What are you missing when you are preoccupied with the past and future events? Life. When you forfeit feeling grateful for the beauty of today, you end up wondering how life passed you by so quickly. So for today's PI, it was hunt for the good, be a flowers at the feet detective, set an alarm or a timer to go off every hour. And when the alarm buzzes, pause and write down at least 3 beautiful, positive, gratitude-inducing things that you presently see, feel, are in some way experiencing. Anytime fear or judgment challenges you, choose instead to focus on what is right within yourself and your friends, family, wherever you are. When a negative thought or criticism arises, exchange it for a positive one. Although things do not always happen for the best, it is always possible to find the best in what's around. So, Stephen, what was this exercise like for you?
I can tell you that it was it's pretty interesting for me because it slows me down, which I'm not a slowed down person. And this forces you to have to do that, right? It's like, hey, stop, right? Even though what you're doing might be great and good and enthusiastic, you can still get lost in that. It's not always something bad. And so I think the most powerful thing for this and other exercises like it is that it forces you to slow down for a second, where we live in such a fast-paced world filled with everything. There's just stimulation everywhere, right? Your family, your kids, your job, the internet, we are constantly being stimulated, and a chance to reflect in any capacity, whether it's to do an exercise or to meditate, to pray, whatever your thing is, I think is an absolute something that we should treasure for sure.
Can you share anything that you might have wrote down when you were saying pause and write down at least 3 beautiful, positive, gratitude-inducing things? Do you have any around right now that you could share with us?
I mean, yeah, at the time I've been really grateful we talked a little bit about this adventure that I've been on. It's very, I don't like moving around too much, right? I like being stationary. And so this adventure that I've been on, although it's incredible, it also causes me personally a lot of anxiety, right? And so one of the things that I've been grateful for is that God gave me a person, my wife, who knows me intimately enough and knows when I'm feeling anxiety and knows that even though we're on this adventure together, she's able to pinpoint when it's time for me to slow down, speed up, sit quiet, right? And I was really overwhelmed when I pray with the gratitude I feel for God putting my wife in my life.
Wow, that's beautiful. I can't wait till she listens to this episode and hears all the great things. And welcome to Houston. We're here.
I'm here, baby.
Yes, and so are we. And so I'd love to spend some time getting to know you a little bit better. We'll have to have lunch at Common Bond and see what we can do to kind of help the community here in Houston and get you settled in.
I'm so excited about it. Houston's been great so far. I've met some amazing people. Lou is one of them. I've got to share quite a few experiences with Lou so far. What a great person to know. And y'all couldn't have done better bringing that guy on.
So we're happy to have him. Yeah.
Huge shout out to Lou. He puts together this event every month for all of us. And he's just always positive. And he was sharing with me about what positive recovery was, and that y'all identify people's strengths and build their curriculum around their strengths and help them capitalize on what it is they're good at. And I think it's so meaningful, the work that's being done at Positive Recovery Center. So thank you guys.
Thank you for being on our Positive Recovery MD podcast today. And we will be sending, I can't even get it to you, but we'll be sending you a copy of the book.
Oh, nice.
So this is just a nice way that we kind of extend people into people's recovery worlds and giving them things to do each day to focus on, and certainly kind of gets us in a good space. So thanks so much for being on our podcast. I've enjoyed getting to know you. Thank you, listeners, and see you soon. Signing out for Positive Recovery MD.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.